Okay, well, I wanted to take a moment and talk about some important things with regard to APA formatting that I think you should know before you submit your literature review. And just to remind, and based on what I've seen in the discussion board is where these are coming from. Um, I wanted to kind of correct some things that maybe you have some misconceptions that maybe you have with APA formatting and referencing and all those things, especially in-text citations and references. Just want to make sure that those are all in line. So I thought I'd send this little email. Remember, if you don't feel like you're, or this video, I should say, remember that if you don't feel like you're comfortable with APA formatting, there are those learning modules. May 28th through June 2nd has one of them in it. I think the main one that would talk about this, and if you look for learning modules citations, and then you go to APA citations, and this gives you some nice reminder or refresher of how to do in-text citations, how to do direct quotes and so forth. So that's a good reminder. But there are other resources available to you. One of the ones that I like is this Purdue Online Writing Lab. And I just Google Purdue or OWL Online Writing Lab that's the acronym for Online Writing Lab. And you can look up APA style, and you can look up things like the formatting and style guide, which is one of the best things that I like here. And then, what do I do for in-text citations? Remember, that's where you're writing and the in-text right there it goes. And then also for reference list items. So it has your basic rules for a reference list, and it also includes examples for a book, examples for articles in periodicals, which I think most of you are going to be citing. And also it has other print sources or other electronic sources. One example of that would be a dissertation. I notice a lot of people are doing that. So if you have a dissertation published, you want to take a look at this format. It tells you to use for that for your reference list. All right, and of course your literature review, preliminary literature review has to have that reference list and also the in-text citations. And we're trying to get those proper so that you know how to do this. For not only this class, because you'll do it quite a bit in the future, but also for other classes as well. All right, one thing that I wanted to point out too is that sometimes we cite too big of paragraphs, and that's what I'm seeing a lot in the discussions is we have this giant paragraph with all kinds of interesting things that you say, and then just at the very end you put the author's, the citation. Be careful not to do that. This isn't an example of that because there's only one sentence here. But make sure you sprinkle in the citations in that paragraph. If all the sentences in, let's say it's a 5-sentence paragraph, are from a single source, don't just put it at the end, but also sprinkle it throughout. Maybe say Morrison, 2009, did a study of this, and here's the findings from this study included, and so that if you say in the next sentence the findings from this study included these things, that you're still talking about the Morrison study. There were also an interesting number of students in this study. Let's say that's the third sentence in the paragraph. So then you put Morrison at the end of the sentence there, Morrison, 2009 in a citation. That way you're sprinkling it, so to speak, throughout the paragraph rather than just putting it once in the end of the paragraph. That way the reader knows that the words are, or the source is that study, not just your own words. All right, another thing to mention is paraphrasing versus direct quotes. So here's some examples of a literature review that I am actually currently working on to try to publish about my experience with Digital Media Camp and a study that I've ran collecting data from that. So this is an example of paraphrasing. More recent findings explain that perhaps digital natives may not, obviously this is a work in progress, may not be as adept as they have been characterized when it comes to information and technology skills. And here I've got a number of sources, not just one, and this is one thing I wanted to point out. You could just have, Nung 2012, and that's the only thing in the parentheses, but if you've got multiple sources that say that same thing, why not lump them all together? And this is one way you can do it, just by separating them with a semicolon. So you've got Bennett, Matten, and Curvin, Lee and Ranieri, and Nung. Another interesting thing about this is that when you have multiple authors, you use the ampersand symbol in within parentheses, but you use the word and if you're citing them outside of parentheses. So let's say I was going to say something in the narrative like Bennett, Matten, and Curvin, and then in parentheses was 2008 only, found that digital natives may not be as adept as they have been characterized. If I did it that way, I would have to use the and word because Bennett, Matten, and Curvin would be outside of parentheses. But since they are inside of parentheses here, I use the ampersand symbol, which is the symbol for and. One of those things in APA. There's a lot of things, right? You're probably thinking there's too many things, but hopefully this will help. All right, so that's paraphrase. That's a paraphrase example. Again, you can put multiple things together, and actually it's a good idea to do this, to think about doing this, because a literature review, again, shouldn't just be a list of here's what I found from this study, here's what I found from this study. Instead, you should combine the studies together and say multiple studies have focused on these types of data that were collected, and then you could list a bunch of them inside of one parentheses, basically. All right, another one, this is a direct quote that I'm going to use in my literature review as well. A democracy relies on media literacy skills among its citizenship. As stated by Martinson, 2009, media literacy, and there's the quote. And then at the end of the quote, I put the page number. Now, you want to put the year always right after the author's name. So I am putting the author's name in the narrative, not in parentheses. And so I want to make sure I have the year right after that in parentheses. And you might be saying, well, this is a direct quote, so you have to add the page number. Yes, but it's okay to put the page number separately at the end after the quote is over. So that's something to be aware of as well. Or I could put something like, a democracy relies on media literacy skills among its citizenship, and then I could just go right into the quote. But in that case, I would have to put Martinson 2009 P5 right here at the bottom. And that would all be in one parentheses. That would work too. So, but anytime you mention an author in the narrative, always put the year right after that author's name in parentheses. And you can put the page number later if it's a direct quote. If it's not a direct quote, remember, you don't have to put a page number. So, for instance, this was just a paraphrasing of what's going on in these articles. Then there's no need for page numbers on these. And let's say this was not a direct quote, and I would just say something about how a democracy relies on media literacy skills among its citizenship, and I end the sentence there. There is no need for anything more than this. Martinson 2009. And then, of course, a period at the end of the sentence. That's all I need. I don't have to put a page number for where that's found in the source because this is not a direct quote. This is just a paraphrase of what's being said there. All right, let's move on to reference items, reference list items to pay attention to. So just a couple of things. References, as all APA formatted documents are double spaced. And so everything should be double spaced in your document. And references are no exception to that rule. They are hanging indent though, so notice the first line pops out to the edge of the page, but the rest of the lines are indented on the reference. And I do that just by going to paragraph settings and then choosing special hanging for all of the references. All right, so let's take a look at some of these. Actually, yeah, I think they're correct. So a couple of things to look for. You've got the author's names, then the year, and then you have the title of the article itself. This is an article. Now, in the title itself, there were a few questions. Generally, there should be no words capitalized except for the first word in a title of the article. So really, I think the only exception to this is if there is a colon. And so really, actually, let me undo that. Sorry. Go back here. Okay. So if there's a colon in the title, the word after the colon is capitalized as well. And this isn't really a colon, but I think it kind of applies because it's kind of meant to be a colon, like a pause in the title. And then this is Chinese, and that's a proper noun, so we probably capitalize a significant word like that, but I wouldn't, if it was like this, it'd be okay. Then the journal title, British Journal of Educational Technology. Then we have the volume number, the issue number in parentheses, and the page numbers for the article. That's how that one works. Now the journal titles, they're usually capitalized because they're a proper publication. The next one down is another journal article. So we have this, we have the authors, we have the year, we have the title. Again, the first word in the title is capitalized, and then any word after the colon. But not every word should be capitalized, like digital natives, debate should not be capitalized, and so forth. And if you notice at the end of this article, there's this DOI link or DOI number. That's just basically a unique identifier for the article. That is not required to be there. I could get rid of it. That's fine. Or I can leave it in. I'm happy with either one of those. APA formatting allows for either one. You can leave it in there or you can get rid of it. I kind of like, honestly, the way it looks without it, but I leave them in just if they're there. So that's a few things to pay attention to on the reference list as well. But you do need to include all of the elements. So it can't just be the author's name and then year. You've got to have title, publication title, volume number, issue number, and year and pages. In some cases, there may not be an issue number, so you might just have a volume number. Maybe they come out just once a year, and so that's why you'd have that maybe. Or maybe they don't do issues necessarily like the traditional sense of issues. So that's one thing to be concerned with too. Well, I hope this was helpful to you as you go through, but again, you want to make it flow nicely in the narrative. So be sure to take a look back at some of those examples too. You can take a look at some of the literature review examples from past students and how they have made it work so that you're reading it. Again, you want to say something, with authors, for instance, you might say something like, instead of saying this study found that, maybe do Taylor 2009 found that, and then you can cite it right in there. It's kind of a natural way. For instance, you could do something like this too. Maybe Taylor's not a good word. I don't know. That could be somebody's last name, right? So you might, instead of saying this study or the authors, just put the author's name right there. I don't know what they would say, but you could do something like this and just talk about it that way. And that's all you have to do to cite it, as long as it's a paraphrase. This is enough. Taylor 2009 found that there were, and you continue on talking about the study. And then maybe you continue talking about the study further and remember to cite Taylor again. So you might end a sentence by saying, this than was previously thought. That's what that should say. All right, so then you, at the end of this same paragraph, you might say Taylor 2009 to remind the user or the reader that this is not your own work, but this is a citation of other people's work. So again, think about these things. Also refer back to those other items, and good luck finishing up your preliminary literature reviews. And I will see you later.